year 1203, Genghis Khan was able to unite the Mongol tribes and was given the title of the Great Khan. He then set out to conquer all of Asia in the fastest invasion known to history. In less than 50 years, his state expanded until its borders reached Korea in the east, Russia in the north, and the China Sea in the south. Ogedei Khan took over the rule after Genghis Khan and annexed the region of Persia to the Mongols. Then Mongol Khan took over the rule and appointed Hulagu as governor of the region of Persia. He sought to conquer Iraq and then the Levant, where Baghdad fell, along with the Abbasid Caliphate, and Caliph al-Mustasim Billah was killed. Then their eyes extended to the Mamluk state in Egypt, so they sent messengers demanding surrender. But Sultan Qutuz categorically refused and called for jihad. The Sultan agreed with the Mamluk princes that Prince Baybars would go out at the forefront of the army first to secure the road from the Mongol ambushes. Then Sultan Qutuz went out with the rest of the army. The eyes of the Tatars discovered the vanguard of the Islamic army, and they believed that this was the entire Mamluk army. And the news was conveyed to the Tatar garrison of Gaza, and the Tatar garrison rushed to meet Baybars, and a quick fight took place between them. The meeting took place in Gaza, isolated from the main armies of the Muslims and the Tatars, and the vanguard of the Muslim army was able to win this small battle, and thus Gaza was the first city to be liberated from the Tatars. And this victory played a role in raising the morale of the Muslims. Meanwhile, Hulagu received news of the death of the Mongol emperor, Mangu Khan, so he returned with part of the army and appointed the commander Katbuga as the emir of the battle. Saif al-Din Qutuz found the Ain Jalut plain a suitable area for the battle with the Tatars, as it is a wide, flat plain surrounded by medium hills on all sides except for the northern side, which is open. He quickly arranged his army and placed the vanguard on the northern plain led by Baybars, and made it in a visible place to tempt the Tatar army to come to him while he hid the rest of the army behind the hills and bushes. And while Qutuz was preparing the army the day before the battle, a man came asking to meet Qutuz and said that he was a messenger from Sarim al-Din Aibak. The messenger conveyed several points to Qutuz, namely the Tatar army was not as strong as it used to be, as Hulagu had taken with him a number of leaders and soldiers, and that the right flank of the Tatar army was stronger than their left flank, and that Al-Ashraf al-Ayyubi, the emir of Homs, would be in the Tatar army with his division, and with him Sarim al-Din Aibak, and that they would be defeated at the time of the battle. Qutuz decided to take this news without neglect or leniency. The Mongol army also arrived, and they deployed their spies to spy. Both sides prepared and spent the night. The Muslim army prayed the dawn prayer on Friday, the 25th of Ramadan, and arranged their ranks after the prayer and prepared. The vanguard of the army was led by Baybars did not hide himself, and the goal of this plan was for the Tatar spies to believe that this vanguard was the entire army. And the vanguard of the army began to descend from one of the hills to the plain of Ain Jalut, and this descent was in several stages. The 1st Battalion descended under the command of the commander Sunkur Arumi. Kabuga looked at the vanguard of the Mamluk army and found that the force appearing before him was very small, so he wanted to decide the battle in his favor as soon as possible, and decided to enter with his entire army and forces to fight the vanguard of the army, and this is what Qutuz planned. Kabuga gave the signal to his forces to start attacking the vanguard, which he thought was the entire army. So huge numbers of Tatar knights advanced toward the vanguard of the army. Baybars and his soldiers stood in their places until the Tatar crowds approached them. Then Baybars gave his soldiers the signal to start fighting, so they set off towards the Tatar army. And clouds of dust rose from the battle, and the sounds of drums rose, and the fighting raged for a few moments. And the vanguard of the army was steadfast in the fighting, and was made up of the best knights, the Mamluks. The fighting continued despite the large numerical gap between the two forces. Then the drums beat certain beats, which were orders from Qutuz to Baybars to withdraw the Tatars into the Ain Jalut plain. Baybars immediately began to implement the orders, so he showed the Tatars defeat and retreated with his back while fighting. When Katbuga saw the retreat of the Mamluk army, he ordered his soldiers to track them down and eliminate them. So he rushed after them without leaving any reserve forces behind the Tatar army, and the Tatar army began to enter the Ain Jalut plain. At this time, The main Mamluk army descended from behind the hills to the battlefield, and a strong group of Mamluks rushed to close the northern entrance to the Ain Jalut plain, thus surrounding the Mamluk army forces with the Tatars from all sides. The fighting intensified, and Qutuz was in a high place behind the ranks, observing the situation. When he saw that the situation had become more critical, he decided to descend himself to the battlefield. So he threw. He took off his helmet and started shouting, "O Islam! O Islam!" The fighting raged in the plain of Ain Jalut, but thanks to God, the Muslims were victorious, writing an epic that was a milestone in history.